one of the signs of oppression, or we can say sin, is that the opposite is happening, that people are suppressed from coming alive. Their essence is being stifled. There's desperation, there's deadening. So what the world needs are people who have come alive. Now, this is one of the many insights taught by Howard Thurman, who was a pastor, a theologian, and a professor, who, along with his wife, Sue Bailey Thurman, played a very important role in the civil rights movement that sought to confront and to transform the forces of inhumanity in our country. So the past few weeks, I've been doing a series of sermons where the question is, what saints, what great ancestors of the faith do you need to be remembering right now? And do we need to be remembering right now? It'd be really helpful to remember and to retell their stories, to receive the wisdom we need to receive the courage we need to receive moral fortitude, to receive a sense of legacy, and to receive the faith that we need to be received, that we need right now. So 2 weeks ago, I shared about Harriet Tubman. Last week, I shared about the lives and the faith of Benjamin and Sarah Lay. And this week, let's meet Howard Thurman. So Howard Thurman was a key spiritual advisor and a wise elder to many civil rights leaders. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as we heard, Bayard Rustin, James Lawson, Pauli Murray, James Farmer, Jesse Jackson, Miriam Wright Edelman, Vernon Jones, Vincent Harding, and on and on. So, if we take a moment and pay our respects and sit at the feet of Professor Thurman for a spell, we may learn something about the kind of faith and the kind of perspective that animated and sustained some great souls through some great struggles for the sake of a more just and peaceable world. So I'm going to cue a couple of photos here, just so we have a sense of Howard Thurman. The first is Howard Thurman as in his pastoral and professorial mode. All right, is that coming up for us? Great. All right, and then the second is also in his pastoral and professorial mode, which shows a little bit of this is somebody with some spark and some brilliance, some delight, someone who himself has come alive. And then the third photo is from Marcy Hall's, an artist, a liturgical artist, who has a series of dancing saints. So this is her depiction of the dancing saint of Howard Thurman with his quote, "There is something that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself." All right, so meet Howard Thurman. So Howard Thurman was born in 1899 in Daytona, Florida, and he was a very bright and eager student from the start, but the policies of his day, the racist policies of his day, barred black kids from public high schools. And so when he reached the 7th grade, what were his options? Now, Thurman fortunately had a cousin who was able to pay for him to attend a private religious high school for African American students. And from there, he received a scholarship to Morehouse College in Atlanta, where he was a classmate with the soon-to-be Reverend Martin Luther King Sr. At Morehouse, Howard Thurman was reported to have read every book in the library. So he went on to seminary and to higher education at various places. He's just hungry for knowledge, and that included, as Shannon shared, time at Haverford College for the sake of studying with Rufus Jones, who was a Quaker philosopher, theologian, spiritual teacher. Thurman was ordained as a Baptist minister, and he served congregations around the country, and he taught philosophy and religion at Morehouse and at Howard University. Howard and Sue Bailey Thurman were the first Americans to meet with Mohandas Gandhi in India. They took a pilgrimage to discuss how Gandhi's strategy of nonviolent soul force could be applied in the struggle against institutionalized racism in the United States. This was in 1935, which was long before the idea would have been even thinkable to most Americans. And so they forged a very important connection between Gandhi and the situation of African Americans. They invited Gandhi to come speak and teach in the United States, and Gandhi said, "I will after we've won our struggle." And unfortunately, that didn't come to pass. He won their struggle. They won their struggle in India. But he died before he could come to the United States. In 1944, the Thurmans started an intentionally interracial and intercultural church in San Francisco called the Church of the Fellowship of All People, or Church of the Fellowship for short, and that included people of European and African and Asian ancestry. And this inspired other intentionally multiracial Christian fellowships across the country. I mean, they started a movement here. In 1953, Howard Thurman accepted a position at Boston University that included serving as the dean at the university chapel. And Thurman used this as an opportunity to replicate this interracial faith community model. And it was at these church services at Boston University that Thurman met a young theology student who turned out to be the son of his Morehouse classmate, the soon-to-be Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And Dr. King later said that he would sit in the pews during Professor Thurman's sermons and take copious notes. And he also said that throughout his life, in all of his travels, in his work for the Civil Rights Movement, Dr. King always kept with him a copy of Howard Thurman's book, Jesus and the Disinherited. So let's talk about Howard Thurman, what he taught that was so influential. Now, we're talking about a very deep and original and wide-ranging thinker who published more than a dozen books in his life, and so I'm not going to pretend to do justice here. But to give you a sense of his range, here are some titles of his books: Jesus and the Disinherited, Deep is the Hunger, The Luminous Darkness, Mysticism and the Experience of Love, Disciplines of the Spirit, and on and on. So the central question that Thurman poses in the book, Jesus and the Disinherited, that Dr. King always kept with him, is, what does Jesus offer to a people with their back against the wall? And in answering that question, Thurman recognized that Jesus was one such person, of a people with their back against the wall. And Thurman said, "I learned more about the genius of the religion of Jesus from my grandmother," who was a key mentor to him, who had been born into slavery. He learned more from her than from all the men who taught me all the Greek and then all the rest of it. Because, he said, she moved inside the experience of the religion of Jesus and lived out of that center. So it's this experience of religious life that Thurman takes very seriously in teaching about how God helps real people to be whole human beings in the face of oppressive circumstances. And Thurman explores the spiritual psychology of oppression and the spiritual psychology of liberative experiences with encounters with God. And he's very influenced by Quakerism as well as his Baptist faith. And he takes very seriously what it is like to be a person who has experienced oppression, who you could say then experiences what it's like to go with Jesus up to the mountaintop and experience the transfiguration, this metamorphosis, and then come down with Jesus down the mountaintop back into a fallen and hurting world, and to share that healing knowledge of one's belovedness as a child of God. And so what I'm going to do is to give you a little immersion in Thurman's teaching and consciousness, and to just share with you some passages from his writing in order to try to do it justice. So what follows is a series of quotes from Howard Thurman. There are few things more devastating than to have it burned into you that you do not count, and that no provisions are made for the literal protection of your person. The threat of violence is ever present, and there is no way to determine precisely when it may come crashing down upon you. The underprivileged in any society are the victims of a perpetual war of nerves, which works its havoc on the souls of the poor. However, to the child of God, a scale of values becomes available by which people are measured and their true significance is determined. And even the threat of violence, with the possibility of death that it carries, is recognized for what it is, merely a threat. Such a person recognizes that death cannot possibly be the worst thing in the world. There are some things which are worse than death, which is to deny one's integrity of personality in the presence of the human challenge. The religious experience, as I have known it, seems to swing wide the door, not merely into life, but into lives. My religious experience makes it possible for me to experience myself as a human being, and thus to keep a very real psychological distance between myself and the hostilities of my environment. Through the years, it has driven me more and more to seek to make as a more normal part of my relations with people the experiencing of them as human beings. When this happens, love is the essential material with which to work. And contrary to the general religious teaching, people would not need to stretch themselves out of shape in order to love. On the contrary, a person comes into possessions of themselves more completely when one is free to love another. The ultimate meaning of religious experience is felt in such a way that all of oneself is included. It is total. It is unified and unifying. It is not the experience of oneself as male or female, as black or white, as American or European. It is rather the experience of oneself as being. It is at such a time that one can hear the sound of the genuine in other human beings. This is to be able to identify with them. And one person's response to the sound of the genuine in another person is to ascribe to that other person the same sense of infinite worth that one holds for oneself. And when this happens, people are free to relate to each other as human beings. Good, bad, mean, friendly, prejudiced, altruistic, but human beings. And so, as a side note, this is me. Howard Thurman had a lot to teach about the practice of nonviolence as a spiritual strategy and as a strategy for societal transformation, as a way of even among those who are being oppressive and violent themselves, to recognize that genuine human being is being shut down in one who perpetrates violence as well as one who is the victim of violence. And so the religious experience frees one to try to connect with that genuineness, that infinite worth of everybody, despite how violence seeks to divide us. Okay, this is Thurman again. Behold a miracle. Love has no awareness of merit or demerit. It has no scale by which its portion may be weighed or measured. It does not seek to balance giving and receiving. Love loves. That is its nature. Whence comes this power which seems to be at the point of referral for all experience and the essence of all meanings? No created thing, no single unit of life can be the source of such fullness and completeness. But there is but one word by which its meanings can be encompassed. God. There is no need to fear evil. There is every need to understand what it does, how it operates in the world, what it draws upon to sustain itself. We must not shrink from the knowledge of the evilness of evil. Over and over, we must know that the real target of evil is not the destruction of the body. The real target of evil is to corrupt the spirit of man and to give to his soul the contagion of inner disintegration. Therefore, evil in this world around us must not be allowed to move from without to within. And so it's a spiritual resistance to be connecting to this experience of God. To drink in the beauty which is within reach, to clothe one's life with simple deeds of kindness, to keep alive the sensitiveness to the movement of the Spirit of God in the quietness of the human heart and in the workings of the human mind. This is always the ultimate answer to the great deception. As a human being, then, one belongs to life and the whole kingdom of life that includes all other lives and perhaps also all that has ever lived. In other words, one sees oneself as part of a continuing, breathing, living existence. To be a human being, then, is to be essentially alive in a living world. And so what the world needs are people who have come alive. And so I'm inviting you all to respond to this invitation, this call, this challenge to come alive and to help others to come alive, despite all of the forces that may be seeking to deaden you to the essential worth of others, despite fear, despite uncertainty, to come alive, despite stories that have been told about us or about others, to come alive with God's help. And with God's help to help others come alive as well. So thanks be to God.